had the opportunity to go across to Italy and to experience some of the food and the people, and now I'm being given the opportunity to share some of the new secrets that I've learned. So let's get started. What I have here is a large fry pan, and I'm going to put the jet on to get some heat under the fry pan, to then put some olive oil into the pan. So what I'm doing now is preparing the ragout, which is one of the main bases of the recipe. I'm going to be putting in 1 large onion, which has been finely chopped, 2 large carrots, and 2 sticks of celery. There's 3/4 of a kilo of pork and 3/4 of a kilo of beef. It's important that this be good quality. I need to determine that the oil is hot enough. So what I'm looking for is just a little bit of a blue haze. I certainly don't want smoke, but a little bit of blue haze indicates to me that it's hot enough. And then I'll get a good sizzle when I put the vegetables in. We're not aiming to brown the vegetables, we just want a translucent colour. But it's important to have the pan hot so that we start to achieve a little bit of flavour. These basic ingredients, which we generally have in the house or in the fridge most of the time, form the basis of the ragout. So it's these ingredients, the meat, and then some tomato, salt and pepper is all that's going into the ragout. Some recipes have red wine in them, some have white. We can also incorporate some basil and some rosemary and thyme. Lots of other different ingredients that people have varied the recipe with. But I was delighted to find that this lasagna is the most tasty lasagna that I've ever tried, and it only has these basic ingredients. It's important when you're cooking vegetables like this that you don't put too much into the pan, and then even more importantly that when you add the meat that you don't put too much meat into the pan. It's because it will start to sweat and stew rather than saute. So this is getting close to being ready for me to be able to add the meat, but I prefer not to put the meat into this pan because I'm going to end up with too large a quantity in the pan, and that'll mean it'll start to stew. So I'm going to take a bowl and transfer the vegetables, which are just becoming transparent. That's the onions are becoming transparent. I'm going to transfer these into the bowl so that I can then use the fry pan for the meat. So this meat's going into the pan. Best to break it up a little bit so that it cooks more evenly, and then continue to break it up while it's cooking. So this is almost at the stage of being ready. What I'm wanting to do is to change the colour, basically. I'm not trying to brown it, I'm just trying to change the colour. So the meat's got to the stage where it's changed colour, and I'll transfer it into the bowl so that I can then cook the pork in the same manner. This is looking good. So the meat has changed colour, this is the pork, and I'm going to return the beef, which was previously cooked, and the chopped vegetables. Then we also need to add the tomato, and this is 4 cans, 400-gram cans. We'll incorporate that, and then we're going to leave it to simmer for 2 to 3 hours. So now we're going to make the bechamel sauce. In this saucepan I have some milk which I was bringing to the boil. We need to scald the milk. So I'm melting the butter, and then I'm going to add the flour. It's just plain flour, and I'm going to stir that and then cook it for a little while, because what I'm doing is making a roux. I like to use unsalted butter when I'm cooking and when I'm baking, and then to add the salt later, because sometimes you'll reduce the sauce to the point where it becomes too salty if you've used salted butter. So what we're doing now is adding the flour and then stirring that in before we go back to cooktop. What we need to achieve here is a fairly loose paste. If it's a very dry paste, you'll find that when you go back to the cooktop to cook it as the roux, that it catches very easily, and then it starts to brown. And we're not wanting to achieve a brown sauce or a brown gravy, we want a white one. So it's important that we don't colour the roux at this stage. So that's ready. I can bring the milk back to the heat. And now, this little trick is going to be a little bit like doing that, you know when you rub your tummy and you pat your head? Because I need to whisk the milk very quickly, while at the same time with my left hand, and I'm not ambidextrous, I incorporate the flour and the butter. This feels strange. Now the bechamel sauce is looking good and smelling good. A little bit of salt and pepper. So what I have now is all the components to put together for the lasagna. This is ragu, which I previously made. These are lasagna sheets. They are fresh lasagna, and you certainly can use the instant lasagna or you can use the dried lasagna. With the Parmesan cheese, it's really important to use a good quality, and I choose to use Reggiano Parmigiano. So the bechamel sauce, you can see, has thickened very nicely and it's smooth. I have a layer of pasta. It's a good idea to have greased or oiled the dish. Then onto that I'm going to place a quantity of ragu and also a quantity, about an equal quantity of the bechamel sauce. About 5 layers is a good idea, but make them fairly thin layers, so this spreading of the ragu and bechamel shouldn't be too thin. Then we're going to sprinkle it with a little bit of the Reggiano Parmigiano. So just a light sprinkling over there, so that will go over the top. And then we're incorporating those just a little bit. We're not actually mixing together, we're just swirling them, a little bit like you do with a marble cake. And a little bit more of the Parmesan, Reggiano Parmigiano. And then we'll repeat the layers. So it will be another layer of pasta and so forth, until we have the 5 layers. And then remember that you mustn't go too close to the top of the dish, because you'll find as it's cooking that it'll start to bubble a little bit, and you don't want it spilling over into the oven. So what I'll do now, this little space here, is serve a portion. So that's lasagna, and I hope that you'll also have a go at cooking it at home.